Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Rafael and I decided that it was time for another 5 tips video since so many people seem to enjoy the last one. Thank you for all the support and thank you to all the new subscribers. Let's get right into it. In the last video we talked about matchmaking, targeted loot, recalibration and optimization, builds, and my final tip was to try and have as much fun as possible and don't worry too much about if you're doing everything the right way. If you want to check it out, it will be down below in the description. So let's talk about today's 5 tips. As always, timestamps can be found in the description in case you want to skip to the parts that you are more interested in. Tip number 1, exotic reconfiguration. Something a lot of players don't know is that you can reroll the attributes on your exotics. It's not like recalibrating an item where you get to choose which roll you want to recalibrate. Sadly, every time you decide to reconfigure an exotic, all the rolls in that exotic will be affected by it. Keep in mind that in doing so, you might end up getting worse rolls. So it's not guaranteed that by reconfiguring your exotic, you're gonna get a better one. The materials needed for the reconfiguration are normal green and blue materials as well as an exotic component. You can get exotic components by deconstructing exotic items. I would recommend you to put some thought to it before wasting your exotic components on reconfiguring your exotics, because increasing your expertise level, which we're going to talk about later on the video, requires a bunch of exotic components that are really hard, not really hard, but are the hardest component to find, the hardest material. Tip number 2, stash management. Most new players tend to keep most of the items they get, even if they don't really need them. Some players are okay with deconstructing or selling almost everything that drops for them because they only play with 5 or 6 builds that they have already optimized. Some others, like myself, tend to store every good item they stumble upon because they might end up using it sometime in the future, even though most of the times we don't. Every character has a backpack of 150 slots. The stash offers 300 slots, but it's shared among all the characters you create. What you can do in order to increase your space is to create new characters and get them to level 30, 32, somewhere around there. Don't quite remember at what point, but around that level, you unlock the 150 slot backpack. By doing so, you get an additional 150 slots for every character you create. And in those slots, you can store items you don't use that often, like exotics or gear sets that you don't want to deconstruct because you might actually need them at some point, but you don't really play with that often, so you don't need them to have in your main character's inventory or in your stash. If you decide to store your items between a lot of characters, before you go out farming for specific roles on an item, make sure to check your other characters because you might already have that item you're looking for. Tip number 3. Expertise and a few tips on how to level it up. Since my last tips video, a new system has been added to the game. That's the expertise system. Long story short, the expertise system works like this. Every item in the game starts with proficiency level 0. Your goal is to reach proficiency level 10 with pretty much every single item and every single skill in the entire game. You can increase proficiency levels by either playing with that item, donating items like the one you're trying to level up. So if you want to level up your police M4, you're going to donate a bunch of police M4 to the expertise tab. Or the third way of increasing your proficiency level is by donating materials. Be careful, however, when you donate materials to not hold the donate button because you will end up donating all your materials and that might be something you don't want to do. I'm going to replay the clip of me donating materials for my sacrificed chest piece and I want you to pay attention to the expertise level at the left. As you can see, with each proficiency level I gain, my expertise level XP increases as well. Keep that in mind because we're going to talk about expertise levels later on the video. After you reach proficiency level 10 with an item, that item gets proficient. At that point, you can increase its grade level. As you can see, each grade level grants plus 1% weapon damage to your weapon. You can upgrade an item's grade level only as high as your expertise level is. So if your expertise level 10, you can only get grade level 10 on an item. Keep in mind that after grade level 10 or something, the materials required for the upgrade start to get really expensive. Things like exotic components that I talked to you about earlier, and quite a lot of them to be honest. Every weapon in the game will give you 1% weapon damage for every grade level. Armor pieces like chest piece, knee pads, backpacks, pretty much every other item in the game will give you plus 1% bonus armor instead of weapon damage. In total, if everything is maxed out at grade 20, you will gain an additional 20% weapon damage and plus 1 blue core of armor or somewhere around there. I'm saying all this because the expertise grind is very long and requires you to be very patient. You can try to no life it, and in a week or so you will probably be at level 20. As you can see, I'm only level 6 after almost 2 to 3 months of the expertise system being out. The best method to increase your expertise level is to play with items that are still not proficient, so you want to increase their proficiency levels, while at the same time you're doing countdown runs with targeted loot being again on items that you haven't gotten proficient yet. That way you increase your proficiency levels both by the XP you gain while you play with the items that you have equipped, but also by picking up around 40 to 60 items per countdown run that you can then donate to the expertise tab. My advice is don't sweat it too much unless you really want to get to rank 20. If you play the game and try out different builds and just make sure to pick up everything you loot so you can donate it, eventually you will get there. Tip number 4, using gear mods and weapon mods the right way. Something I see a lot of people doing wrong is not taking full advantage of the gear and weapon mods. As you can see, my build over here has 40% crit chance and 105% critical hit damage. I want to reach as much critical hit damage as possible and around 55% critical hit chance. The only thing missing from my build are the weapon and gear mods. You want to always try and get as much critical hit chance as possible from your weapon mods and not your gear mods. This is the reason why. Weapon mods can offer you a maximum of 15% critical hit chance and 50% critical hit damage. Every weapon mod will either give you 5% critical hit chance or 5% critical hit damage. Most weapons in the game come with 3 slots that can take those type of weapon mods: the sight, the laser or the grip, and last, the barrel. Gear mods, however, can give you a maximum of 18 critical hit chance or 36% critical hit damage. Again, we can use only 3 gear mods. 1 gear mod on our mask, 1 gear mod on our chest piece, and 1 gear mod on our backpack. Critical hit chance gear mods go all the way up to 6, so they only give you 1% extra critical hit chance compared to the weapon mods. The critical hit damage gear mods, however, offer you all the way up to 12% critical hit damage instead of only 5 that the weapon mods offer. So in the exact same build, if I used weapon mods for critical hit chance and gear mods for critical hit damage, I will get 54.5% critical hit chance and 141% critical hit damage. But if I use my gear mods for critical hit chance instead of my weapon mods, I will get 57.5% critical hit chance, which is only 3% higher than before, and 120% critical hit damage, which is 21% less critical hit damage than before. I understand that getting maxed out gear mods is something that it's very hard to do, and it's all about RNG. But if you have the option to choose between the two, always go with critical hit damage gear mods instead of critical hit chance, and on your weapon modes, go with critical hit chance instead of critical hit damage unless you don't need more critical hit chance, Tip number 5, and the last one, numbers lie. So for the final tip, I decided to go with something more complicated. I'm not good at math. I actually hate math so much that it's one of the reasons why I decided to study law. I wanted to avoid maths at all costs. So for obvious reasons, I will avoid including math into the video. You will understand why I'm saying this very soon. As you can see, Glass Cannon gives you 25% amplified damage and Obliterate gives you 25% increased damage. A lot of new players will look at those numbers and assume that that's the same. Well, it's not. Here I have a build with Glass Cannon on it, 106% critical hit damage and 50% critical hit chance that hits for 689k per bullet when we get critical hits. And then the exact same build, the only thing that I changed is the Obliterate. You will see that it hits for less. Just give me a couple of seconds to get my stacks up. We get 661k. The build is exactly the same. Even the chest piece is the exact same chest piece. I just recalibrated the talent. So amplified damage is better than increased damage, even if the percentages that they give are the exact same. Another example of that is multiplicative and additive damage. Here you can see the damage formula based on which your damage output is calculated. I won't even pretend to use it for my builds or to understand it, but some of you might want it and some of you might actually be good at math. There are plenty of Reddit posts about it that explain pretty much everything about the damage formula that you can search on Google. I will have a couple in the description for you to go and read. So some bonuses in this game are additive and some others are multiplicative. Critical hit damage, for example, is additive, and damage targets out of cover is multiplicative. As you can see, with 145% of critical hit damage and my Fox sprayers that gave me 8% damage targets out of cover, I hit for 587,000. If I change my Fox sprayers and lose the 8% damage targets out of cover and instead get a piece of Grupo Sombra that will give me an extra 15% critical hit damage that will help me reach 160% critical hit damage in total, my bullets will hit for 577,000. Which obviously is 10k less. So even though 15% of critical hit damage sounds better than 8% damage targets out of cover, it's not. The reason for that is that multiplicative bonuses, generally speaking, increase your damage more than additive. I could probably spend an entire afternoon trying to understand exactly how the multiplicative versus the additive damage work, as well as the amplified versus the increased, but I will drive myself crazy. I suck at math at my own language, so trying to understand math in another language is even harder. Don't even get me started on how hard it is for me to explain a concept I don't fully understand in a language that's not my native. Trust me, I've tried, but I simply cannot do it. Just keep in mind that sometimes numbers don't tell the whole truth, so the best thing to do is just test everything out. If you're ever in doubt, start doing your own tests. The shooting range in Division 2 serves a very good purpose, and that's actually allowing you to test pretty much everything. Not everything can be tested in there. For example, you cannot test buffs that other players are going to give to you in a group situation, right? But you can test pretty much anything else other than that. Just keep in mind that not all attributes are equal. 8% of damage targets out of cover doesn't translate to 8% critical hit damage. So that's it pretty much. I hope that you found the video helpful. I hope you find the tips helpful. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to smash the like button and to subscribe for more content when the next season comes out, when Title Update 16 comes out in a couple of weeks, because we're gonna get quite a lot of quality of life changes. I'm gonna make sure to create another tips video for you guys. So subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye bye.